He's an award-winning journalist whose work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal and in publications like the Christian Post and National Review. His writing is smart, incisive, and original. But get this, he's still in college. A self-described truth seeker, our guest tonight is someone who identifies as a Christian first, before his political affiliations, before his race, or any other distinguishing characteristic. And if you read his work or listen to him speak, you'll begin to understand why we've invited him to be a guest on tonight's program. If you're interested in understanding how the rising generation of leaders is thinking, don't miss tonight's program. Stay with us. Here's how our special guest, Isaac Willour, a student at Grove City College, writes about the first days of life as an American. 2 decades ago, a plane touched down on the East Coast with an Indian child on board. For the past year, all he'd ever known was the sun streaming through the orphanage window in India's Tamil Nadu province. As the plane's wheels hit the ground, he could not possibly have known how much this new country would not only give him opportunities his birth mother could only have dreamt of, but change him at the deepest possible level. On that day, 20 years ago, something truly strange and wonderful happened. I became an American. I can't think of any better way to begin the conversation with Isaac Willour, who's joining us from God's County, Mercer County, Pennsylvania, and the campus of Grove City College. Isaac, welcome to State of Independence.
Joe, thanks for having me on.
It's amazing. So here it is, you're this young guy. You've already had an incredible journey. Tell us a little bit more about your family. You were, as a small kid, you were living in an orphanage.
Yeah, that's correct. From birth to about 1.5 years old. Yeah, and last July it was 20 years, which is crazy to me. But
wow.
It's been the best 20 years of my life.
Yeah. And so you how do you end up coming to the United States? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I was part of an adoption agency. I was in an orphanage in the southern part of India, and an American family decided that they wanted to adopt an Indian baby. And I'm told they were originally planning to adopt a girl. Clearly, God had something different in mind for that. And I got here at 1.5 years, and I really haven't left since. Yeah.
Is there any record of who your birth mother or father might be?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. That's one of the strange things about adopting out of what was then a third world country, is the information we have is very scant.
Yeah. But you have thrived here. You talk about becoming an American, so it means something to you. Now, how old were you when you made that trip?
A year and a half.
A year and a half old. And you're raised and you are an American citizen, yeah. And your life has been amazing. I don't know of too many of you. What are you, 20 years old now?
21.
You're 21 years old. I don't know of too many 21-year-olds who can claim to be award-winning writers. I'm a little bit older than you, and I have yet to win a single award for anything I've ever written.
If the quality of your work is an indication, I'm sure you will at some point.
Well, you're very kind. You're kind to say that, Isaac. I don't think anybody's going to be waiting for that to happen. But tonight's about you, because of who you are and what you've done, and how God has used you. The family that adopted you and brought you here, a Christian family?
Yeah,
pastor?
Yeah. My father's a minister in the Orthodox Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
So the religious part has been around ever since I've been here.
Right. And but the interesting thing is that I'm sure you, like every other American, you've got political views and all kinds of views on stuff that you've written on, and yet and still you self-identify first as a Christian.
I mean, that has honestly been the only part of my social identity that has really stayed constant, because political identities change, political views obviously change a lot, because we're in an environment that's fraught with political change. But Christian kind of stays. Christian lasts, and it doesn't change what it asks of you, right? Because we can all agree that even describing as a conservative now brings up, even if it doesn't mean something fundamentally different, comes across as something fundamentally different than maybe what it meant in 2004. And people perceive you differently because you're saying that you're conservative in 2023 as opposed to 10 years ago. Christian, there are some perception issues, but in terms of the actual philosophy at hand, it hasn't changed that much, which is a source of great comfort, obviously. Religion does transcend politics. That's another explanation for it, too. Another thing, you got to commit yourselves to the transcendent things first.
Do you see people in the States? I mean, what you're saying is, I think, right on point. Religion obviously transcends politics. When we leave this place and we have to stand before our Maker to be judged, there's nothing in the Bible that says that God's going to ask us whether we were a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
And that only pertains to America. Exactly. Your voting record doesn't get pulled out. How much money you've contributed, how many campaigns you've worked on, how hard you campaigned, or how deeply you believed in whatever your party's philosophy doesn't end up having to do much with how God judges your life, it appears. I mean, God wants to know.
Or how much you didn't care, to be fair. Like, there's a current trend of people being like, well, I don't care about politics. It's so fraught. It's so toxic. I'm just checking out of politics. I'm not right or left. I'm just not a part of politics. And that manifests itself in a variety of ways. But it's like, not caring about politics isn't a panacea either, right? Because, again, when we stand before God on Judgment Day, he's not going to ask, how much did you or didn't you care about politics? I think currently it's very cool to not care about politics. And to be sure, you can definitely care too much. And it's important to understand when you need to take a step back. But it's okay to care about politics, just as long as you don't make it your fundamental identity. We have a lot of questions about identity right now. Maybe attaching our identity to things that are transient, fleeting, can change based on what party strategists think the issue platform needs to look like isn't the best solution.
Yeah, the editor of Christianity Today was a guest on this program and said that he felt that a lot of Americans were making politics, or certainly some politicians, their idol, that there was idolatry, in other words, and he cautioned against that, rightly so, because we follow Christ. That's who we follow. That's who I follow. I know that's who you follow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, it's really interesting. There's a poll that came out. I'm forgetting the exact specifics of it right now, and other ones we don't need to get super into. But in terms of people rating their beliefs in the truthfulness of people, and it was like friends and family, pastors, political figures, etc. There's a certain political figure was at the top of that poll at like 75%, above friends and family, above religious leaders. That's a bizarre place to be in as a country.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been on the planet for some number of decades, and what we're seeing in the country now is very different from what I saw when I was your age in the country. Certainly in terms of how we perceive politicians and how we treat each other. I'm just saddened by. For Christian people, at least, the law of love is supposed to be ranked at the top there. Like love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's supposed to be what.
Well, love your enemies.
And love your enemies and pray for those, right, who abuse you. All that's right there in the scriptures in the New Testament. I mean, this is Jesus talking, telling us how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. And do you see a lot of evidence among among Christian or people who self-identify as Christians today? I mean, you have millions who self-identify as Christians, but as somebody who is obviously watching, and you're a younger person, do you see much of that demonstrated in the society today among professing Christians?
Yeah, I can probably speak best to what I've experienced among my own generation in particular. My generation's obviously Generation Z is one of the least religious generations in recent memory, especially in America. One of the things I've noticed is that we don't, and this is not a new insight, plenty of people have written about this, but it's this idea of when we don't have something truly transcendent that we feel like we're fighting for, some transcendent moral value that we feel can be our guide star, our lodestar, we tend to fill that void with a lot of other things, right? We have a lot of different, right? America's religions there are a lot of other kind of civic religions that are at play in America, whether it's sports, but obviously my area is politics that happens there. It's a battle because we're human beings. We need something to fight for. And if we can't fight for something that's truly transcendent, that we believe to be true above all else, we're going to find something else. And because we're humans, we're probably not going to find super good options, especially as people who are 20, 21, 22 years old. We don't have the lived experience to pick those battles correctly. And that's how we get to the kind of political activism that is incredibly toxic, incredibly fraught, and helps nobody.
Yeah, my concern is, are Christians, certainly for younger people, as you look to older people as an example, are Christians helping or hurting? I mean, are there examples of Christian people who, like, in other words, if you happen to be a Christian, but if somebody your age who was not a Christian, observing the divide in the culture and the voices that are loudest, would you be inclined to say, would that person be inclined to say, Christians are helping, I want to be on that side? Or would they be inclined to say, boy, the Christian folks, I don't know what they're about? I mean, tell me how it looks to you from your vantage point as a young person.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of both. I mean, I will say, once you get beyond kind of the way that we've nationalized every single political issue that exists, once you get down to the local level, there's a lot more church involvement. And there's a lot of obviously, there's a ton of abuse in the church. There are a ton of real issues in the church that we need to not minimize, not gloss over. But we also need to not forget about the fact that there are also a lot of churches and a lot of religious institutions that are really doing some tremendous work in real communities, like not Twitter circles, real communities. And we shouldn't, I think our job, I mean, my job, especially as a journalist, is we got to find the communities that are doing that work. We need to highlight them. We need to hold them up as a model of this is what we need to be doing more. And it's so much more than the fight between Christian nationalists, Christofascists, and moral relativist communist Marxists. Those are very obviously extreme characterizations, but I've heard both, right, from people my age. We can get beyond the spin of that. We just have to take the time. We have to take 5 minutes and actually look in our own backyards and see what's actually being done. There's tremendous work being done. And there's tremendous work being done on the national scale too. We just need to be willing to understand that not every church is Marcel, not every pastor is Mark Driscoll. Some are, and we shouldn't excuse the people that are. But when it comes to making our own backyards better, that's where we should be focusing, because that's the stuff we can change. And turns out the stuff we can, changing things within your own sphere of influence, this is something I'm only beginning to learn because I'm 21 years old, is that if you're fighting on behalf of things that you believe to be transcendentally true at your local level with people that you care about on issues that matter, that's how you find lasting satisfaction. And this is a thing that social scientists have been talking about for decades.
So how do you make friends? I mean, you're in Grove City. So Grove City is
I'm a political science major. We don't make friends. It's a lot of things, right? It's like most of it is, it's funny. I was homeschooled like virtually my entire life. So I've gotten the how do you make friends question all the time. And it's the same way everyone else does. We open up our mouths, we talk to people, we find people that more or less share our values. And obviously I have political coworkers who are friends. I've been blessed to work with a lot of really tremendous political organizations that understand that thing that you were just talking about resisting extremism and actually investing in local communities. How do I make friends? I find people who are like me in a certain way, or sometimes it's people who do agree with me politically. Not all those people are religious or share all of my values, but we can build a common understanding. And then, you meet people at the gym, and you find people just the way people have always made friends. But it's weird. Social media's made that really weird. I have a ton of friends. I was realizing the other day, the amount of friends I met this year who I know on social media and had never met in person is just skyrocketing. Yeah. And that, I think, is something that is more or less not unique, but highly characteristic of Generation Z, is that, and will be of the next generation, Alpha or whatever it's called, is that there are a ton of friends where it's like, oh, we've had super deep conversations about meaning of life, your views on stuff. I don't know how tall you are. I don't know very basic things about you. And then you meet them, and I'm 5'9", and I meet them, and they're 6'4", and I'm like, oh, we should stay online friends. This is weird.
Yeah, well, that's part of the challenge of this new generation, yeah. and all of us have to deal with it. I mean, just think, even for people who are older, they've had to adapt to social media, because social media really dominates now. I mean, older people are on Facebook and I don't know what other platforms are considered old, but Instagram
old took over Facebook. It's so weird. This used to be the place where 30-year-olds hang out. Now it's like my mom's friends are out there, and I'm like, this is the core demographic of. But I mean, and to be fair, like on the topic of making political friends, and I'm sure you experienced this when you were working with HW and whatever, was that it's the temptation to make friends based on the people you mutually don't like is really strong. Right.
I'll tell you what's interesting. When I worked in the White House, which was a while ago, but I worked in the White House with George H.W. Bush, I had friends on both sides of the aisle. As a matter of fact, I did a couple of TV shows with some Democrats from the Democratic National Committee, and we debated on TV about stuff. And then afterwards, we got together and we had lunch. And then I invited them to the White House, and they asked me if I could help them get some tours, which I did. And then when Clinton became president, they helped me get some of my friends into the White House and get tours and to do things. But there's a real sense of love and respect. And these people are still my friends. Now the environment has changed, of course. In this environment, people may not even love other people in their own party based upon what branch they are. You might be a Democrat, and if you're not a progressive, another Democrat might look unfavorably upon you. If you're a Republican and you're not a conservative might look upon that Republican as not really a rhino, Republican in name only. You've got all this kind of stuff going on, but the love. What's happened to the love? I mean, I self-identify like you as a Christian first, Jesus first. That's who I follow, and that means that maybe everything that everybody is saying in my party isn't always right. Maybe people make mistakes, and the same is true of the other party. And whether they are right or wrong, I have love in my heart for folks. I love them. People in my own family, for instance, who may disagree with me politically, I love them. I love them to death. They're my family members. I'm going to do anything I can to help them, and that's how I feel about them. And there's nothing that's going to change that. I think that's the way Christian people are supposed to be. But I'm kind of feeling these days like maybe I'm kind of in the minority, that there are a lot of Christians that would say, my love for you is qualified based upon what you think and how you view the world. Yeah,
it's so hard. I mean, one of the skills that has been difficult to develop but incredibly fulfilling to do so is the ability to like people independent of their political beliefs. Like, in a sense, and in a way, you'd like to just not know people's political beliefs and you just be friends based on other things. The industry I work in, that's not really feasible, but I feel like for most people it is. But yeah, it's so true, because I have friends who are progressive Democrats. I have friends who are like really Catholic integralists. I have friends who are Christian nationalists. I think they're all good people. They're all operating in good faith, and I don't think they're bad people. And they're really nutty, all of them. And we have these fights all the time, and that's okay. And we can fight as hard as we want. I like arguing. Like, it's one of my former bosses, Jonah Goldberg. It's like, I like arguments, right? Democracy is about disagreement, not agreement. He's right about that. We should be able to have these fights all the time and really hash these issues out. But the minute that steps into, I disagree with this, and as a result, you're a fundamentally flawed person based on my understanding of what you believe to be best for society. Are there moments when that's true? Of course there are. But don't throw that around. That's a big gun, and it shoots really big bullets into hearts, and it leaves holes in people. And it's something to really be careful about how you deploy it. And sometimes it's necessary. You shouldn't not deploy it when it's necessary. But civility isn't all we need, but it's really something that is helpful. It's a building block to something bigger, right? It's not enough to be decent. We have to be decent in pursuit of something, and ideally that would be truth, but it depends on who you're talking to, I suppose. Yeah. When we return, I'll ask Isaac about the ways the believers, Christians, can be both courageous and principled, but at the same time focus on persuading in a loving way. Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
His name is Isaac Willour. He's a journalist and soon to be graduate of Grove City College, so that means he's young. Isaac has developed a strong media presence in the last few years, offering a voice and a viewpoint that's in so many ways unique for his generation. Isaac, when did you learn you had an aptitude for thinking and writing? This whole journalism thing is my dad's fault. I think I was probably either a junior or senior in high school, and I was
was into writing. I will not say I was good at writing because I was decidedly not. But he said, you should look into journalism. And I kind of, at the time, I was like, absolutely not, right? I wanted to go to law school. I want to do something that's going to make money, that kind of thing. But as I went along, I realized that, the job of journalists is to be professional storytellers or storytellers of a kind. And what do conservatives talk about all the time? We need good storytellers. And it's true because we like talking about policy. We like talking about principles. We like talking about old dusty books. We're not all that great at telling stories. And what we need is people who, one, because the thing about telling stories is it's kind of twofold. You have to actually be able to say what happened accurately, but you also have to understand who's listening to the stories. And how do we tell those stories in a way that's going to identify with them, it's going to click with them in a way that makes sense? And in a sense, that's what journalism is about, right? You're telling true stories well to the people who care. And I started doing that in freshman year of college. Man, that feels like so long. It wasn't, don't worry. And I just never stopped, And I've gotten to tell some really interesting stories, from people in Hong Kong to people on death row to people in villages in Ukraine. This is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, right? I've gotten to tell some really interesting Christian stories too, about some really tough people of faith whose character puts us privileged people in the United States to shame. And those are really interesting stories. People like interesting stories, right or left. People like compelling stories because it's just interesting.
So May comes and you graduate from Grove City College. And and now well, I'm sure even now as we speak, you're probably considering the job market. I know you have lots of offers because you're at your young age already an award-winning author. So there'll be lots of offers coming your way. So where do you feel God leading you? I mean, here it is. You're a storyteller. You're already an experienced and highly regarded storyteller. Where do you feel God's leading you? Are you going to work for a newspaper or for a TV or media outlet, or what do you see it, God leading you?
Yeah, that's the part where I'm trying to be open, right? Because I've got a couple months before this happens, and it's a terrifying prospect. And anyone who's about to graduate from college knows just how terrifying it is. But I would like to. There are a lot of interests that I have, right? I've been, over the summer, I was working at a place called the Acton Institute in Grand Rapids, the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty. Great group of folks, right? And I got to do a bunch of really interesting research on American conservatives and racial issues. That really interests me. There's a ton of issues related to the First Amendment that interest me. There are lots of stories that need to be told. I'm looking for a place that will let me tell those stories to the people that want to hear them the most. Right? I think that's the mission. As to what that looks like practically, I mean, this is May 2024 is in a sense the best time to come into the political jobs market because everyone does care all the time about politics now, but everyone's about to start caring about politics all the time, all day, every day, more than they do now in the run up to November. So I don't anticipate there's going to be any shortage of opportunities. It's just sorting out the wheat from the chaff in terms of good opportunities. And I've been blessed to work with some really, really fantastic people, and I'm confident that something will materialize.
Do you think the presidential campaign will kind of be a turbo booster in terms of where you head?
It'll be a turbo booster to a lot of things. I can't say that any of them are going to be particularly great. In terms of me specifically, I mean, there's stuff to write about on the campaign trail. There's always interesting things. I don't yet, as of now, see a super clear-cut path in terms of me working in electoral politics, although I wouldn't say no, right? Because I'm 21. I could learn. I'm open to learning pretty much anything at this point. But will it be a boost to a lot of things politically? Yeah, it will. My generation loves to vote more than previous young generations have liked to vote. And you're going to see a major uptick in activism. You're already kind of seeing it, particularly from Democrats, because that's just how my generation has politically sorted itself. But yeah, no, it's turbo boost is a very good way to put it because it illustrates the impact. and it does not imply that it's going to be good, which is probably accurate.
Well, thank you, Isaac. It's been a privilege getting to know you and hearing
Those are really optimistic notes.
Yes, and hearing your heart for God and loving others. I'd like to have you back in a few years for an update. It'll be fun.
Yep.
It's truly been an honor having you on State of Independence.
Joe, it's been fantastic. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll be back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman, with closing thoughts.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
But that was really one of the most fun conversations, it really was. And look, Isaac has obviously the intellect and the ability to slice and dice people who would be his political opponents. What I think is beautiful about the way that he ranks his faith first is that he doesn't use that intellect as a weapon. He uses it to maybe turn over some of your thinking, to maybe challenge what you've said, like saying he loves debate and he loves to argue. You can see that, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he loves to be around people who are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just to hear him describe, very progressive socialist people or people who are Christian nationalists or however he described, to think about those kinds of people around a table.
Yeah.
Where is that happening in America?
Right.
I want to be at that table.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have a hard edge to him either, which is really nice. I mean, a lot of people who have strong opinions.
He's got great hair.
Yeah, he has great hair. I love his hair. And he's got a sweet spirit to him and a loving spirit, which is really what Christians are supposed to have, and we're supposed to be that way.
If you're going to be advertised as a Christian, and you arrive on the scene, I think what people today, and he alluded to it a little bit, are bracing for is a kind of a personality that's going to say, you know what you need to know, what you need to do, and they're expecting someone to come in and say everything has to change about you before I can love you, talk to you, respect you, engage with you. And what he is saying is, don't leave any of that. Bring it all. Yeah. And we'll talk and we'll be friends. And if you change, great, but there's probably some things about me that have to change. And I thought that's what was a great central part to his message. I think he's going to do pretty well in life. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't wait to see him, bring him back and see how he's done.
If we can get him.
If we can get him, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was a great show, good conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to this young man. Well, if you know a young person who's trying to find their voice, struggling to know who to follow and who to believe, or where to take a stand, I hope you found tonight's conversation with a young thought leader encouraging. Isaac's story from an orphanage in India to the pages of the Wall Street Journal might sound unusual, but when someone lives a life surrendered to God's purpose and plan, it's not all that strange, is it? Take 30 seconds right now to visit our website at joewatkins.org. Let me know how Isaac's life and witness gave you hope. For Jeff Coleman and the entire production team here at Lighthouse TV, thank you for welcoming us into your home. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. Can't wait to see him in person.
Did you have hair like that?
Never that long. Never that long. It was longer than it is now. But never.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.